video, capital account transactions are anything that alters your assets and liabilities, right? That's how it's defined under section 2 subclause E of FEMA. So let me just write that down as well. Section 2 subclause E of FEMA 1999, let's just call it FEMA, whatever. So I don't know, this is basically the bulk of what transaction lawyers do. They hardly ever look at current account transactions rules. They're always looking at capital account transactions rules. And I don't know, when I was interning, people were just very impressed that I knew the basic difference between current account transactions rules and capital account transactions. It also made checking the law a lot easier for me because I really didn't have to ping pong between regulations all that much. Just knowing the general scheme helped a lot, right? So if you know the difference between capital account transactions rules and current account transactions rules, you will not look at current account transactions at all if you're dealing with what you know to be a capital account transaction, right? So just by doing that, you know where not to look, so it'll be a lot easier for you to do your research. That's why I think it's really important to know the general structure, and this is not something that law firms will ever teach you. It's something you're sort of expected to pick up as you practice, and I just think that's, I don't know, it's just easier to know this, and it's fun to know it. I don't know, I've always loved dealing with regulation, so this is my forte, and I thought it'd be helpful. So capital account transactions are dealt with by the Reserve Bank of India. Again, there is a demarcation made here, right? So it's generally made by the Reserve Bank of India, but we have two kinds of capital account transactions: debt and non-debt. So this is a relatively new thing. It came up around 2021, 2020. I don't know exactly when that was, but it wasn't always like this. Traditionally, capital account transactions were held by the RBI exclusively. Now it's both the RBI and the central government. So anything which is classified as non-debt, you go to the Union of India rules, right? So it's dealt with under rules, right? So if you know that you're dealing with a non-debt instrument, and I'll get into what that means in a bit, you'll never have to look at regulations by the RBI, at least not immediately. You'll always have to check again whether there are interpretations that the RBI has given, and that's troublesome, but at least you know where to look, right? Debt is dealt with by RBI regulations, right? So this is Union of India rules, and this would be RBI regulations. Okay. Right. So how do you know what's a non-debt instrument and what a debt instrument is? So you actually have to refer to something else called the Foreign Exchange Management OI rules, or Overseas Investment Rules 2022. So if you look at these rules, you go to Rule 5. It has an exhaustive list of what is a debt instrument and what is a non-debt instrument. Debt and non-debt. So you look at this, you check if the instrument we're dealing with is a debt instrument or a non-debt instrument, and you just go on from there. And I will cover examples, I'll cover problem situations. So everything we've discussed so far, I will be putting it into practical application. So you don't really need to worry if you're not following. We'll go step by step. There's a lot to do in FEMA, and I'm just covering the broad basics. If you know this, you're already good to go, right? So for capital account transactions rules, we generally refer to the FEMA capital account transactions. FEMA Foreign Exchange Management Permissible Capital Account Transactions Rules. FEMPCAT rules, right? Sorry, regulations, yeah. No, wait, what is it? Yeah, is it rules or regulations? Anyway, you refer to these capital account transactions regulations, and you have two schedules under this. One is Schedule 1. This governs investments made by PRIs. PRI, that is person resident in India, where your asset is outside India, right? So basically this is outflow of money. Schedule 2 deals with PROIs, persons resident outside India, where the asset is inside India. So what happens here is under Schedule 1, money is going outside India. Schedule 2, money is coming inside India. So it's helpful to understand that our government is happier if money comes into the country rather than money going outside the country. So if you read Schedule 1 of the Capital Account Transactions rules, you'll see that it's a little bit more stringent than Schedule 2, which deals with where a PROI is investing into an asset located in India, because that's inflow, that's the former is outflow. We don't like outflow, we like inflow. So that's just something to keep in mind. It really helps contextualize your whatever you're working on really. So essentially what you do here is that when you go, you'll notice that I've said that there's something called a person resident in India and PROI is person resident outside India. This is a completely different topic called residence in FEMA. So before you even start looking at how somebody is going to invest, you got to check out whether they're a person residing in India or not, right? And that's just, it's a little bit more complicated it's more complicated than whether someone is actually just living in the country or they're living in some other country. There are rules and requirements, and it can be a little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. So I'll explain that in a separate video. But for now, we just have to know what a PROI is and what a PRI is, right? Right. So, yeah. So when you look at these rules, it'll tell you what is covered under Schedule 2 and what is covered under Schedule 1. After this, generally what we do is, when we look at non-debt instruments, we go to the FEMA NDI rules, right? And this is generally the most important set of rules that we'll be working with under FEMA ever, right? Because when a company or an investor or an individual wants to invest into an Indian company, they are subject to certain limits, right? So the government is probably going to be okay with you investing into technology or agriculture or something like that. They're going to be a lot more selective when you want to invest, especially if you're investing a lot into sectors like energy or defense, right? So each of these sectors has a certain cap beyond which you cannot invest, right? So you check the NDI rule. So NDI stands for non-debt instrument rule. So this is essentially equity or investment. So a bulk of corporate transactional work happens under the NDI rules. So you refer the NDI rules and you look at the sectoral caps, right? So for example, if I'm a person resident outside India and I am investing into India, I check the NDI rules for caps, right? So for example, and I'm just giving ideas, I don't know if these are real caps or not. You might have something like railway sector, you might have someone saying that, well, I want to invest 80% into this company, but you might check the NDI rules, and the NDI rules say you can, it's 49% allowed under the automatic route, which means you can automatically invest 49% into a railways company under the automatic route. But if you go beyond 49%, it may be barred outright, or it may require you to take prior governmental approval, and that might delay your transaction, or that might change what you really do. So this is essentially what you want to look at, the NDI rules, right? But even after you look at the NDI rules, you're not really done. So people generally found all of this to be a little bit complicated. So the government comes up with something called the FDI policy. It's essentially a compilation of all these things, and you'd hope that they'd match, right? So just got to check if it's matching. Generally, it's the same thing, but the FDI policy is a consolidated place where all of these things are together. So that's the FDI policy. So even after you look at the FDI policy, and the latest one I think is 2020, so FDI policy 20, you will also have to look at the RBI press notes which come out from time to time, directions, master circulars, this and that. So it's an endless amount of, research into essentially what goes and what does not go. Has the government backtracked on their position? Have there been amendments made? So this is generally the whole scheme of the Foreign Exchange Management Act. And in my next class, I think I'll probably do a deep dive into current account transactions rules or capital account transactions rules, depending on what you guys think is more helpful. But this is the general scheme of FEMA. There are a lot more topics, and NDI rules can be very deep. So I will be coming out with fact scenarios, which can get quite complicated, and we'll break them down step by step. Again, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more, I guess.